Hi, welcome to Worship Lab. I'm Pastor Scott Frederickson here at First Lutheran Church in Blair, Nebraska. Glad that you can join me for this last session, Table Along the Way. We did a four-part session on how to be a host, how to host a meal. We started out talking about making sure you invite people to a particular meal, talking about what you're going to have for a meal. Last week we talked about how to say thanks, saying some kind of table blessing. And now this week we're going to talk about what do you actually do at a meal besides eat. Now, there's no doubt that if you're a good cook or if you have a good cook available to you for this particular meal, you're in good shape. But there's more to a great meal than just food. And I want to take a look at the Gospel of Matthew in the 22nd chapter. Jesus goes to a meal, gets invited. He receives an invitation, although they didn't usually do paper invitations back in those days. But Jesus gets an invitation. Well, the reason why everybody else is showing up is because they want to see Jesus. So then, what does Jesus do at a meal? How does Jesus host a dinner, so to speak? If he's the guest of honor, or if he's the special guest, what does he do? And the Gospel of Matthew in the 22nd chapter here, beginning in the first verse, gives us a little clue. Here, listen up. Once more, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. And again he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business. Well, the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned the city. Then he said to the slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they had found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe. And he said to him, 'Friend, how'd you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. And then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" All right. So Jesus is telling a story here about a banquet. He was at a banquet, telling a story about a banquet. And for those of you who are into any kind of postmodern structural film or literary criticism, the meta within this particular story is beyond compare. But it's a story within a story. So Jesus has this particular understanding that this banquet, this table along the way is going to be available to everybody, and he's going to invite people. He's going to send an invitation. But you may not accept the invitation. You may have other things to do, or you may say, "I really don't like this guy, and I don't want to go to his meeting." And then Jesus says, "Well, enough people do that. The king's going to get enraged." He destroys the city, and he sends out the next group of servants. Remember, now the last ones just got killed, so I'm not sure that these servants are saying, "Oh, this looks like a good job, boss. Thanks." But nonetheless, he sends out the next group and says, "Invite everybody," and they invite everybody. And of course, one guy wanders in who he's not even there for the wedding. He's just wandered in. Jesus is saying, "No, that's not how this works either. We just don't want you to show up and just see what happens, but rather to be part of the celebration that we're about." Yesterday, in the midst of this COVID-19 diaspora and pandemic, I went to a funeral. Now, in this particular case, it was a funeral of a Jewish woman. And what was most impressive about Elise in my time of knowing her over the last few years was that she was one of my favorite dinner companions. Over the years, I've had a chance to have a few meals with her, and I always relished sitting next to her if I could, so that her and I could talk. And she could tell me stories of her life, which was fascinating, and I could listen and regale in the ways in which she brought about such faith and such love and such compassion for God and for the world. And even though our religious affiliations are different, there was a deep shared common core of value about a meal, and about that meal being able to be something that builds relationships and strength. I mean, how cool is that? That we can sit and share a meal with somebody, and it doesn't have to be an elaborate meal, but we can share a meal with somebody and get to know and learn about them. You know, as time goes on, if you have many similar dinner companions, and if you're going to do this during this particular diaspora, and you're going to try to host a meal, be a table along the way, know that if you invite somebody who you don't know anything about, as the host, it's kind of your job, your responsibility to kind of get to know the person. New kid came to school, and you come home and you say to your mom, "Mom, I think we should invite this kid over for supper." All right, so you invite this kid over for supper. Your mom and dad, they don't know anything about him. You only know a little bit about what you've been able to glean from school. So what do you do when you eat? Well, you don't just sit there and glumly kind of pick at your food and quiet. No, you use this time to ask a question. Well, where were you born? Do you have any brothers or sisters? What kind of things do you like to do? What's your favorite kind of food? To be able to ask questions like that so that you can get to know somebody. And as the relationship deepens and as you know more and more about somebody, you ask different types of questions. Questions that are constantly adding to what you know about this person. And so my friend Elise, who died, we didn't always have to talk about things like family and friends, but we could talk about the things we saw in the world and how we saw God acting in the world. The Jewish God that she had come to know and love and revere over her time on earth. The God that I knew through Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit that I've come to know and revere and love through my time on earth. And in fact, the last time I saw her alive, we were at a meal that she hosted. And she had a great love for the food that she presented, but the stories that she told and the ways in which she engaged people in conversation, it was a treat to be part of her dinner table. She had a way of asking questions that, although I thought I knew the answers, because I was giving the answers, in reality, maybe my perspective hadn't been broad enough, or maybe I had just taken an easy answer instead of doing the hard thinking that required to really get a decent answer to a serious question. A table along the way, the communion table that God offers us in the presence of Jesus Christ, the table that we have here for the fellowship meals that we do in our midweek meals or any of that kind of stuff, is designed to continue to build relationships, to find ways that we can continue to work and walk together, so that all of us in our journeys will be able to find tables along the way where we can express ourselves and learn about ourselves and about each other and about the great variety and wonder of this world. So I encourage you, if you are able, sometime over the course of this diaspora, to make a table along the way. Maybe it might be just family or friends. But whatever it is, find a way that you can continue to build the relationship using the table and the gifts that God has presented at that table to strengthen the ways in which you're related to each other. To remember to be able to invite somebody, not only those people you know, but sometimes those people you don't know, to be able to serve something that is nutritious and helpful and hopeful, the Word of God, the presence of Jesus, a good hamburger. Also, how important it is on a table along the way to say thanks, to give thanks to God that there is a table for us to gather. And even if our food is not sumptuous or elegant, but meager or wholesome, that we understand that it is a gift to be able to have food. And there are so many that do not. In fact, I encourage you, if you're inspired by this Table Along the Way series, to find a way that you can contribute to hunger issues, not only in our town, in Blair, or here in Nebraska, but throughout the world. And we have excellent partners who are able to help us in this area. The food pantry at Joseph's Coat here in Blair, ELCA World Hunger Appeal for our international folks, and Bread for the World, to find ways that we can feed so many. So I invite you to take an opportunity to explore one of those folks as a way to share your table along the way. And then finally, when you've invited people, the food has been set and the presence is there and the grace has been said, to just sit back and enjoy the meal, to enjoy the people that you're with. to have a conversation. And it can be as meaningful or as trivial as you want it to be. But I can tell you that after 57 years, I've had a lot of meals. I don't remember every bite of food I've eaten, but I do remember those people who made those meals memorable. My grandfather, Elise, Marty, Chris, Dan, Rachel, Maddie. These are just some of the names of people who have made my meals so entertaining, so enjoyable, and so meaningful over my years. And to be able to have meals with a mom or a dad, with a grandma or a grandpa, a good friend, or a stranger, is to be able to explore the variety and wonder of God's grace. And the table along the way is the way in which we not only learn about God, not only learn about each other, but we learn about ourselves. We'll conclude with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Well, Worship Lab is going to continue the Table Along the Way series, but this time not about hosting a meal, but what happens when you receive one of these invitations and you're a guest at a meal. And we'll take a look at some of the ways in which Jesus asks us how to be a guest at the meal he hosts. I'll see you next time. Have yourself a good week. Be well and stay in touch.